So I think it's time I finally talk about Brandon Clarke, who could be the actual steal of the NBA draft. I'm pretty sure I've used that terminology for other players this year. But given how good Clarke is and the fact that he was selected with the 21st pick in the draft, he may have the title. 13 points, 6 rebounds, insanely efficient for the Grizzlies. He's a great inside scorer. He looks like he's going to be a versatile defensive player with a decent amount of upside there. A forward who teams were afraid of because he, not a great shooter. Is he big enough? Is he not big enough? Is his wingspan there? And then suddenly he shows up and no, he's totally fine. And in fact, he's actually really good. And he's one of those rookies who's actually helping you win right when he shows up, which we don't see a lot. We have seen it a little bit more the past couple seasons, but there's still a whole lot of rookies who come in there and they just are not good, right? Clarke is a day one positive impact guy. And I think I want to start with the offense. He is really, really good at playing off the ball. He sets a decent amount of screens, and this sounds really simple, but he just knows how to roll to the rim. The timing with ball handlers, all that type of stuff. He recognizes cutting lanes really well. He's constantly moving on offense. And his finishing ability is kind of insane. I mean, he's shooting 72% at the rim. He's shooting 63% from floater range. He's shooting 65% from 10 to 16 feet. And some of this is that he clearly has perfected floaters and hook shots and things like that. But he's also just really smart. He's aggressive when it comes to getting into position. He doesn't do the thing that Jahlil Okafor did a few years ago, where he would have post position, but then he would keep walking out into about like 12 feet when he could have posted up from like 7 feet. Brandon Clarke doesn't have that problem at all. Once he gets position on a guy, whether he's a smaller dude or whatever, he just plants himself and waits for the ball. He's pretty damn competent with busting out a little post move here and there. And he's also very quick with it as well. He doesn't take too long to really think about what he's going to do. And when you have as good of touch as he has, that's going to end up with a lot of made baskets. I mean, the dude he's got a 70% true shooting right now. And typically when you have a true shooting that high, you're a center who just dunks everything. This is a 6'8" power forward who's shooting hook shots and stuff. Now, another part of all this is you have to have a competent dribble in order to get that extra foot or whatever closer to the basket, and he can do that. This is not like Serge Ibaka where you can trap the ball handler and there's not going to be any dribbling. I mean, Clarke can definitely get his floater or a dunk or a layup off after dribbling a few times. He seems pretty comfortable with doing that. And because of how smart he is, part of me thinks he could end up being a solid playmaker for the Grizzlies as well. And if we talk about that handle a little bit more, one thing about him is he's doing some stuff off of closeouts. I don't know, I mean, maybe he can be an ISO guy in time, but he's definitely good enough right now to where if the defense leaves him open, he can take it off the dribble and do something himself. He's not just going to stand there and basically just his only option is shoot a three-pointer. And we'll get to his shooting in a second here, but he just seems like a really versatile offensive player who is great at finishing from basically 12 feet and in. And when you can just constantly find ways to get to that part of the floor, you can do a lot of stuff. Now if we get to his shooting. So 46% on 1-3 a game, basically. This was a thing with him, right? Is how good of a shooter is he going to be? Because he didn't take that many threes in college. And, if we look at it, there are some games where he's going 0 for 3 or whatever, but there's a whole lot of games where it's like 1 for 2 or 2 for 2 or whatever. And I think that's intriguing enough. His free throws are solid at 80%, about 1 a game. The thing that I'm intrigued by is his form. It seems pretty alright. I mean, I guess he just wasn't a super comfortable shooter in college and he's warming up to it now, because I don't think his form has anything that's drastically wrong with it. I mean, his release point seems to be where you'd want it to be. I don't think his elbow is flaring out or anything. He seems to get good elevation. It seems to be all one fluid motion. But I guess the one thing is he does have a bit of that like Siakam last season, Giannis, not so much this year, but a little bit still this year thing where you can tell he's kind of got to think about the shot a little bit. Like he's got to make sure his feet are set and he's got to make sure that he's like straight on with the rim rather than just shooting it because he is just instinctively a shooter. So that'll come with time, but given how good he's been already, even if it is on a lower amount of threes, I think we can be optimistic about him being a good shooter. Now, we'll get to the defense in a second here, but I do want to talk about the lineups that Brandon Clarke has played in because I think it's kind of telling with how versatile he can be. Because, there are some lineups where he's playing with one big, where it's Jaren Jackson or Valanciunas. But there's also some lineups he plays in where there is no center at all. And I think that is interesting. I feel like we're going to see teams do that more and more where, especially if you're playing against backups and you're not really scared about the center making you pay for going small, and even against some starters, because there's a lot of centers nowadays who aren't going to kill you on a switch and things like that. So you figure, why not? Like, let's put a guy out there. I mean, sure, you're probably not going to do it against Philly or the Nuggets or the Lakers or a couple other teams, but there's a lot of teams you can do that against. So I think Brandon Clarke could have a lot of use there. Especially if his threes are going to be good and suddenly it's like, oh crap, the dude who our center is guarding can shoot, and then that's going to make you shuffle some things around, and that could give the Grizzlies an advantage. And as far as when he's playing with Jaren Jackson, I mean, we'll talk about Jaren because that's the long-term goal here. I mean, it seems like a pretty good fit, if Jaren, assuming he gets the fouls figured out, can be this center who could be a shooter and can post up and roll to the rim and finish alley-oops and stuff. And then Brandon Clarke can do a lot of the same things, just, the shorter version of it. Then that's going to make Memphis really difficult to defend, especially because we must remember Ja Morant is going to be the dude leading the show for them on offense. And hell, you still got Dillon Brooks, who's a decent shot maker. So, I mean, there is an avenue for the Grizzlies to be a really good team just off of their offense. But of course, when we look at the defense, I mean, when the switchability of Brandon Clarke and Jaren Jackson, who we think can be a defensive player of the year guy, Memphis could be a hell of a two-way switchy team in a couple of seasons. But let's talk about Clarke's defense a little bit now. He seems pretty legit, man. I mean, the dude's an athlete. His wingspan is not insane, and that was one of the reasons why he fell as far as he did, but his defensive instincts are there. He finds a way to just be in a lot of plays. He seems competent, and it just all kind of makes sense, I guess. And even so, his wingspan isn't terrible. Like, he has a 6'8 wingspan. Okay, that's still effective. It's just he's not the 6'8 dude with a 7'2 wingspan or whatever. And he can definitely switch across a few positions, so he's good, man. Is there any sort of fear with him moving forward? I think the fear would be if he's simply not as good on these floaters and stuff, and he's just getting lucky. I mean, he is shooting 65% on 13-footers, and yeah, that's going to go down, but I don't think his finishing at the rim is going to go down because 72% at the basket, that's like a normal number. I mean, it's a normal number amongst people who are really good at finishing at the rim, but it is attainable. Whereas the 60% stuff from like 3 to 16 feet, like that's going to dip down, but assuming that's going to be in the mid to high 40s, and then he's going to be great at finishing at the rim, and we assume in time drawing contact and getting to the free throw line more, then he's still going to be really good there. Maybe he's actually a bad shooter, and this 22-game stretch is like fool's gold with him from outside, but I don't think it is. I really don't. And even if his offense never really comes around, which, again, it has definitely been good this season, but if we're going to be super cynical, then he's still going to be a guy who plays really hard and gives you a lot on defense. So I kind of love Brandon Clarke. I mean, I think at the least he's like PJ Tucker, because I do trust the jumper. At his best, I think he's, I don't know, man, maybe like a higher scoring Paul Millsap. I know I used the Millsap comparison for PJ Washington, but so I don't know. I mean, picture a world where Brandon Clarke averages like 17, 18 a game or something. Anyway, he's really good. That's the point.